In October 1704, a ship called the Cinque Ports was dying. Its hull was cracked. Its wood was rotting. Its crew of 42 men, down from 90, were starving, sick, and terrified. And one man on board knew it. His name was Alexander Selkirk. He was 28 years old, a Scotsman, a privateer, and the only man on that ship brave enough, or foolish enough, to say out loud what everyone was thinking. He told his captain, Thomas Stradling, that the Cinque Ports would sink if they kept sailing. He demanded the ship be repaired. Stradling refused. The argument turned violent, and then Selkirk made a decision that would change his life, Tabafobrum, and the history of literature, forever. He demanded to be left behind, on an island, alone, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, 670 kilometers from the nearest human settlement. The island was called Masatierra, part of the Juan Fernandez Archipelago, a chain of volcanic islands in the South Pacific. No one lived there, no indigenous tribe, no settlement, no one. Captain Stradling was happy to leave him. Selkirk had challenged his authority one too many times. The crew lowered a boat, rowed Selkirk to shore, and left him with everything he owned: a flintlock pistol, a small amount of gunpowder, a knife, a hatchet, a Bible, some tobacco, a flask of rum, a few navigation instruments, and enough food for a few days. As soon as the ship began to pull away, Selkirk changed his mind. He waded into the water. He shouted. He begged. He waved his arms. He pleaded with the captain to take him back. The Cinque Ports kept sailing. It grew smaller and smaller until it was nothing but a dot on the horizon, and then it was gone. Alexander Selkirk was now the only human being on an island 18 miles long in the middle of the largest ocean on Earth. He was 28 years old. He had no way to leave. The first months were the worst. Selkirk stayed on the shoreline, too frightened to enter the jungle. He could hear sounds from the interior of the island, strange noises he could not identify. He ate shellfish and lobster and waited. According to the accounts of those who later spoke with him, Selkirk seriously considered ending his own life during those first weeks. His pistol had enough ammunition. The loneliness, he said later, was worse than anything he had ever experienced. Then the sea lions arrived, hundreds of them. They came ashore for mating season. Enormous, aggressive, deafeningly loud. They took over the entire beach. Selkirk had no choice. He gathered his belongings and fled into the interior of the island. And that decision, forced on him by animals, saved his life. Because the interior of Masatierra was nothing like the hostile shoreline. It was a paradise. Fresh water streamed down from the volcanic peaks. Wild turnips, cabbages, and pepperberries grew everywhere. And the island was home to hundreds of feral goats, left behind by Spanish sailors decades earlier. There was food, there was water, there was shelter, everything a man needed to survive, except another human being. Selkirk built 2 huts from the wood of local trees. He covered them with long grass and lined the insides with goatskin for warmth. One hut was his sleeping quarters, the other his kitchen. When his gunpowder ran out, he could no longer shoot the goats for food, so he learned to chase them, on foot, barefoot. Over months, his legs grew so strong and his feet so hardened that he could outrun any goat on the island. He would catch them with his bare hands. At night, the island's rats attacked him in his sleep. They bit his feet and his hands. So Selkirk tamed the island's feral cats. He fed them goat meat, and in return, they slept beside him and kept the rats away. For 4 years, cats were his only companions. When his clothes rotted away, he made new ones from goatskin. He sewed them using a rusty nail he found on the beach as a needle. He crafted a knife from the metal hoops of an old barrel that had washed ashore. He sang psalms and read his Bible every day, not for God, but to keep his ability to speak. Every day, he climbed to the highest point on the island and stared at the horizon, looking for a ship, looking for any sign that the world he had left behind still existed. For months, he saw nothing but water. Selkirk would later tell a journalist that there came a moment, he could not say when the loneliness stopped hurting, when the island stopped being a prison and became something else, a home. He said he was never as happy in his life as he was in those years alone. During his 4 years on the island, 2 ships came. Selkirk saw them from his lookout point and ran to the shore, desperate with hope. Then he saw their flags, Spanish. England and Spain were at war. Selkirk was a British privateer. If the Spanish caught him, he would be tortured, imprisoned, or hanged. He had no choice. He ran. He climbed a tree, a tall one, thick with leaves. He pressed himself against the trunk and did not move. The Spanish soldiers searched the island. They came closer and closer, until a group of them stopped directly beneath his tree. They stood there for what must have felt like hours. Selkirk held his breath. He did not move. He did not blink. At one point, 2 of the soldiers relieved themselves at the base of the tree. They never looked up. Eventually, the Spanish gave up the search. They returned to their ships. They sailed away, and Selkirk was alone again. On February 2nd, 1709, 4 years and 4 months after he had been abandoned, Alexander Selkirk stood on his lookout point and saw something on the horizon. A ship, then a second one. He grabbed a branch, he set it on fire, and he ran faster than he had ever run, down the mountain, through the forest, across the beach, waving the burning branch above his head. The ships were the Duke and the Duchess, English privateer vessels commanded by Captain Woodes Rogers. When the landing party rowed ashore, they drew their guns. Standing before them was a figure they barely recognized as human. A man in goatskin clothes, barefoot, sun-darkened, wild-haired. He was trying to speak, but after 4 years without hearing another voice, he could barely form a sentence. And then something extraordinary happened. The pilot of the Duke stepped forward. His name was William Dampier. He stared at the wild man on the beach. He knew him. He had served with Selkirk before. He had been part of the original expedition. He told the captain, "This man is who he says he is. He is Alexander Selkirk, and he has been here for over 4 years." Rogers was astonished by Selkirk's physical condition. The Castaway was stronger, fitter, and healthier than any of his own crew. Many of Rogers' men were suffering from scurvy. Selkirk fed them fresh goat meat, wild vegetables, and fruit. Within days, the sick sailors began to recover. The man they had come to rescue ended up saving them. The crew of the Duke told Selkirk what had happened to the Cinque Ports. He had been right. The ship had sunk. Not long after leaving him on the island, the Cinque Ports went down off the coast of Colombia. Of the crew of 63, only 8 men survived. They managed to swim to a nearby island, but there was no paradise waiting for them. No fresh water, no food, no shelter. The survivors were captured by the Spanish and thrown into a dungeon in Lima, Peru. They were tortured, they were starved. Only Captain Stradling, the same man who had refused to repair the ship and who had abandoned Selkirk, eventually made it back to Britain. A broken man. The man who chose the island lived. The men who chose the ship died. Selkirk's instinct, the one everyone had ignored, had been right all along. Selkirk returned to England in 1711 after a successful privateering voyage that made him a wealthy man. His story spread across the country. Journalists interviewed him. Sailors bought him drinks. He was the most famous castaway in the British Empire, but those who knew him said he was never the same. His feet, hardened by 4 years of barefoot running, swelled painfully inside shoes. The noise of London overwhelmed him. The routines of ordinary life irritated him. He told a journalist named Richard Steele that he was never as happy in civilization as he had been alone on his island. The world he had missed so desperately was now the world he could not stand. In 1719, an English writer named Daniel Defoe published a novel, the story of a man shipwrecked on a desert island who survives alone for 28 years. He called it Robinson Crusoe. It became one of the most famous books ever written. Scholars still debate exactly how much of it was inspired by Alexander Selkirk. Some say he was the primary source. Others argue Defoe drew from many castaway stories of the era. What no one disputes is this: Selkirk's story captured the world's imagination, and it has never let go. Today, the island where Selkirk lived is officially called Robinson Crusoe Island. It was renamed in 1966. A bronze plaque on the cliff reads, "In memory of Alexander Selkirk, mariner, who lived on this island in complete solitude for 4 years and 4 months." Alexander Selkirk died at sea in 1721. He was 45 years old. He had contracted yellow fever aboard the HMS Weymouth. He was buried at sea, off the coast of West Africa. No grave, no headstone. Just the ocean that had defined his entire life. He was a man who made an impossible choice. He chose an island over a ship, solitude over obedience, his own instinct over everyone else's certainty. And he was right. The ship sank. The crew died, and the castaway lived to tell a story that, 300 years later, we are still telling. Thank you for watching Mindfall. If this story stayed with you, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. Every view, every share, every subscriber helps us keep telling the stories that deserve to be remembered.